Good afternoon, everyone. I have been writing a story for you, which I hope you will enjoy. The title of this narrative is The Story Behind the Myra and Joe book. It was a cold October day when my little family arrived in Gary, Indiana, a small remote city in northern Indiana. I was still young. And the thing that most impressed me as we came in on the Santa Fe train was how drab and gray things looked in comparison to all the color, the trees, and the greenery I had grown to love in Houston. At that time, Gary was a major steel production city, and my dad had already lined up a good paying job at one of the steel mills. We were quite poor living in Houston, but my dad had managed to support me, my sister, and my mom going from job to job, but never being able to hold on to any employment. I think perhaps it was his drinking that seemed to get him in trouble. He was an alcoholic, and I remember one time going to a bar trying to find him so I could bring him home. But now we were in a new city, and I don't know if I knew how to pray, but I was hoping my dad would be able to hang on to his new job, and that our lives would change for the better and stabilize. Subtitle: Someday I'm going to write a book. I think I was 9 when my teacher gave the class our first writing assignment. We could choose the topic, and it had to be at least 2 or 3 pages long. I don't know why, but I chose to write about feelings. When I got my paper back from the teacher, there was an A plus scribbled in red at the top. I had never gotten an A plus on any of my other school subjects, so I was walking in the clouds. I think it was there and then that I decided someday I'm going to write a book. But it would be many, many years before that wish would come true. Life was going to be a long, bittersweet journey for me, and the bitter part began in my first year at school there in Gary, Indiana. The school was a mixture of white Jewish, Afro Americans, Puerto Ricans, and me. I think I was the only Mexican in that school, which consisted of all the elementary grades and high school. Subtitle: Learning to Fight. During the first month at my new school, I was hit hard, literally, by a reality I had not fully realized: that I was living in a low income neighborhood and attending a ghetto school. The hit hard part came one day while I was strolling across the basketball court. Out of nowhere, this little black boy, about my size, unexpectedly came up to me and punched me right on the nose. Ouch. He hit me so hard it knocked me flat on the ground with my nose bleeding. I was shocked. I had never experienced that kind of violence. I ran home holding my nose and the blood making a red stain on my nice white shirt that my mom had just ironed that morning. About a week later, it happened again with that boy sneaking up on me and punching me and giving me another bloody nose. From that point on, I lost focus on all my classes and my newfound passion for writing. My young life at age 9 had turned into a fight for survival. And by the way, the last time I saw that little bully, I surprised him and punched him first. He never bothered me again after that. Subtitle: Writing My First Story at the Indiana State Reformatory. I'm skipping around as I meander through the early years of my life and my quest for writing. At this point, I am 17 years old, and I find myself at the Indiana State Reformatory, the place that was to be my home for the next 2 years. You see, living in Gary, Indiana, which is probably the toughest, meanest state in the U.S., was a very detrimental place for young boys to grow up in. In the mornings, I'd sit at my school desk and learn reading, writing, and arithmetic, and at night, I'd major in fighting and stealing. So one night, my teen buddies and I broke into this house to steal some things. We were all caught eventually. And though we were underage, they still sent a couple of us to this reformatory, which was a nice name for what was actually a prison. If you saw it from a distance, you'd know it was a prison. It had a 30-foot It had 30-foot high walls all around, a gun tower at every corner, and a population of 2,000 men and one 17-year-old teen, me. The other teen who was with me at this reformatory got bailed out by his family, who paid big bucks to have him serve only a couple of months. But my mother was poor and couldn't do that. But, bless her heart, she did send me $25 a month, which got me coffee and snacks and essentials like soap and toothpaste. Subtitle: Every bad situation has a silver lining. I sized up my situation and tried to see how to make the best of it. My living quarters was about 6 feet by 8 feet. The stark furnishing consisted of one metal bunk bed, one sink, and a toilet. Thankfully, it only required minimum maintenance to keep it clean and tidy. This was good. It meant I would have lots of time to start on my new writing project. I would be writing under conditions of utmost quietness and tranquility, without the noise of TV, loud music, or any distractions. The exception was the loud clanging when the cell doors opened to release everyone so they could go to the mess hall for meals or for recreation at the outdoor exercise area. There, on the exercise grounds, I had to be constantly on guard, watching out for the old timers who were known for grabbing the young inmates and taking them to the infirmary to violate them. So I stocked up on writing pads and pens, which I would buy with the monthly allowance my mother faithfully sent me. And I knew it was a sacrifice for her to send me that money, since she lived alone with my little sister and had little income. By this time, my father had passed away, died from alcoholism. But since he'd been in the military, my mom benefited from a pension check that the Army would send her every month. Subtitle: My first novel. My first narrative was a romance story. I would get up early before breakfast, pull out my writing pad and pens from under my bunk bed, and start writing. Before long, I had several letter-sized pads full of my scribblings and paragraphs of what was turning out to be a very nice romantic story, or so I thought. Every 10 pages or so, I'd knock on the metal wall and ask the guy in the cell next to me to take a look at the pages I'd done. My writings must have been good because the guys would compliment me and always asked if I could give them a copy once I'd finished. I had hoped they would also help me to edit my material, but they knew less about the nuances of grammar than I did. But this writing was only a small beginning. It was peanuts compared to what I dreamed I could someday write. Okay, subtitle. Lost my place here. Okay, hold on a minute. Hold on. I'm coming back. I just lost my place. I'm reading off of my cell phone. It's kind of jittery today. Don't know why. Okay, here we go. So, subtitle. My first novel. My first narrative was a romance story. Okay, I think I already read that one. Yes, sorry about that. Here we go. The next subtitle is It was in 2014 that I would begin my first major writing. Christmas of 2013 was very special for me. I had been reading and poring over all the stories and material I could find on the Nativity, the story of Joseph, Mary, and baby Jesus. It was as I'd been caught up in a vortex of passion for the young woman from Nazareth and her fiance and the miracle baby in her womb. The more I implored and sought after these protagonists, the more I wanted to know them and get closer to them. It mattered not the limitations of time, space, and body. It seemed to me as if my quest for their love and beauty, framed in the light and warmth of the Nativity, transcended all limitations, and at that moment it stood at the center of my universe. Oh my God, what's going on? I wondered. Why am I getting all emotional about the nativity scene? Subtitle. It came to me in a quiet thought. I'm falling in love with God. Yes, I was falling in love with God through his Mary, Joseph, and baby Jesus story. Of course, I questioned myself right away. Is this a possibility? Is this even good or right in the eyes of God? He answered me right away. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and mind and soul. Matthew 22:37. It's a wonderful feeling when you fall in love with someone here on earth. But this was infinitely beyond that. I was falling in love with deity. Wow. Now I wanted to do something to manifest my love, to show God my gratitude. And guess what I decided to do? I decided to write a book for him. And what better theme could I choose than to write the story of Mary, Joseph, and baby Jesus? Subtitle. The Myra and Joe narrative is born. I knew this was going to be a big project. It was going to be the entire story of Jesus' life, from birth to crucifixion to resurrection, and all the in between episodes. As I prayed about this enormous endeavor, I began to see visions, impressions of what the storyline would be like. I saw some scenes of a royal realm where the father, mother, and son were in a very large rotunda with a clear dome all around. They were observing a faraway planet and discussing the hostility and wars that were taking place on that orb. The father expressed sadness because this was a planet and people, this was a planet and people they had created to live in peace and harmony. But now it was in chaos and peace was only a hope. Then I heard them discussing a wonderful plan of redemption, one that would require a visit from their son, the prince, and even a short rendezvous from the father and mother, and even a short rendezvous where the father and mother would visit a young virgin woman. Subtitle. Subtitle. The story developed in my mind's eye. I realized that the Father in my vision was God, the Holy Father. The Prince of Peace was Jesus, and the Mother God was the Holy Spirit. But strangely, Mary's name would be Myra, Joseph would be Joe, and Jesus would be Emmanuel or Manel for short. Uh, I'll read that again. But strangely, Mary's name would be Myra, that's spelled Myra. Joseph would be Joe, and Jesus would be Emmanuel or Manel for short. The reason for this slight variation of names was because the narrative would occur in the modern day world of the 21st century and not the historical first century Palestine location of 2,000 years ago. What's more, the planet that the persons of deity had observed beyond the rotunda was not Earth, it was planet Zerth. That's Zearth, Zerth. Identical to Earth, same people, but living slightly different lives. Same countries, but some with different names. I'll read that once more. What's more, the planet that the persons of deity had observed beyond the rotunda was not Earth, it was planet Zerth, identical to Earth, same people, but living slightly different lives, same countries, but some with different names. Now I was beginning to worry just a little. This narrative was taking on dimensions much greater than I could have ever imagined. My faith was getting pushed beyond its limits. At one point, I exhaled and said, I don't think I can do this. This is much bigger than I. Of course it is, God seemed to say, but it is not bigger than I am. Subtitle. And so the writing for Myra and Joe began. I began writing Myra and Joe sometime in late 2013, or maybe early 2014. The finished manuscript would be published on Amazon 5 years later in 2018. The book, about an inch thick, had 446 pages, which I can truly say are the embodiment of my blood, sweat, and tears. There were many, many difficulties and battles along the way, but my rescuer lifted me over each barrier and guided my pen through each day and night of this incredible literary journey. Subtitle: Otherworldly Aspects of the Myra and Joe Story. Something of a transcendent nature is occurring between the Earth parallel stories. These stories are separated in time by 2025 years and in distance by 800 light years. I'll read that paragraph again. Something of a transcendent nature is occurring between the Earth parallel stories. That's Earth, Earth, and Zerth, Zearth, parallel stories. These stories are separated in time by 2025 years and in distance by 800 light years. What was happening to Jesus on our planet on Wednesday, Nisan 14, in the year 33 AD, is a mirror image of what was happening to Manel, Emmanuel in parentheses, on planet Zerth on April the 10th in the year 2047. Jesus, Jesus and Manel's crucifixion is what happened on these parallel dates, both occurring on a Wednesday. Okay, so don't fade away. This is not that complicated. Just repeat that one again for clarity. What was happening to Jesus on our planet on Wednesday, Nisan 14th, in the year 33 AD, is a mirror image of what was happening to Manel, in parentheses, Emmanuel, on planet Earth on April the 10th in the year 2047. Jesus' and Manel's crucifixion is what happened on these parallel dates, both occurring on a Wednesday, Nisan 14th. The touchstone for Manel's crucifixion date is if it occurs on Nisan 14 and on a Wednesday in a year where the high Sabbath begins the next day, a Thursday, Nisan 15. And Manel's execution date fits this criteria to a T. Had it been the year after or before 2047, the crucifixion date would not have fallen on a Wednesday, and the high Sabbath would not have been on a Thursday. And how, you might ask, how did I come up with the year 2047? Easy. In the book, Manel is born on December 25th, 2014. Jesus lived, according to many scholars and theologians, to the age of 33, and so did Manel in his narrative. So I added 33 to 2014 and got 2047. And since I began writing the manuscript in the year 2014, after a few chapters, I realized I needed a specific time for his birth year. So I simply chose that same year of the book's initiation, which was 2014. I had no idea that year would harmonize the timing and the dating sequence that would produce the exact correlation between Manel's crucifixion and Jesus' crucifixion of over 2,000 years ago. Okay, just a little side note on all these dates where I'm using the month of Nisan, that's the Hebrew Jewish month for April. So I'm using the not only our Gregorian calendar, but I'm also referring in some places to the Jewish Hebrew calendar. Okay, subtitle: The Crucifixion of Jesus on a Friday instead of a Wednesday. It's important to note that in the above text, I placed Jesus' crucifixion on a Wednesday instead of the customary Friday. This I did wanting to adhere not to traditions but to actual biblical scripture. The New Testament places Jesus' crucifixion on Nisan 14th, which was the preparation day before the Passover Sabbath. This is evidenced by John chapter 19, verse 13, which says the Jews requested Pilate break the legs of the crucified men to keep them from staying on the cross during the Sabbath, which was a high Sabbath. This suggests the crucifixion happened on the 14th of Nisan, the day before that Sabbath. Also, this correlation of dates allows for the 3 days and 3 nights that Jesus said he would be in the heart of the earth. Matthew 12:40. Okay, so these are very important parts of the story here. So I'm going to back up a little bit here and read some of this over. I'm going to start. The touchstone for Manel's crucifixion date is if it occurs on Nisan 14th and on a Wednesday in a year where the high Sabbath begins the next day, a Thursday, Nisan 15. And Manel's execution date fits this criteria to a T. Had it been the year before, had it been the year after or before 2047, the crucifixion date would not have fallen on a Wednesday, and the high Sabbath would not have been on a Thursday. And how, you might ask, how did I come up with the year 2047? Easy. In the book, Manel is born on December 25th, 2014. And by the way, you can get this book on Amazon. Okay, Manel is born on December 25th, 2014. Jesus lived, according to many scholars and theologians, to the age of 33, and so did Manel in his narrative. So I added 33 to 2014, and I got 2047. And since I began writing the manuscript in the year 2014, after a few chapters, I realized I needed a specific time for his birth year. So I simply chose that same year of the book's initiation, which was 2014. I had no idea that year would harmonize the timing and dating sequence that would produce an exact correlation between Manel's crucifixion and Jesus' crucifixion of over 2,000 years ago. Crucifixion of Jesus on a Friday instead of a Wednesday. It's important to note that in the above text, I placed Jesus' crucifixion on a Wednesday instead of the customary Friday. This I did, wanting to adhere not to traditions, but to actual biblical scripture. The New Testament places Jesus' crucifixion on Nisan 14th, which was the preparation day before the Passover Sabbath. This is evidenced by John chapter 19, verse 13, which says the Jews requested Pilate to break the legs of the crucified men to keep them from staying on the cross during the Sabbath, which was a high Sabbath. This suggests the crucifixion happened on the 14th of Nisan, the day before that Sabbath. Also, also, this correlation of dates allows for the 3 days and 3 nights that Jesus said he would be in the heart of the earth. Matthew 12:40. My God, what beautiful poetry the Creator has inspired for the creation of this book. A thought to ponder. Is the story of Myra and Joe actually unfolding now in real time on a planet 800 light years away? End of the narrative. And at the bottom I do have contact information. Carlos A. Cedillo, contact information, email carlos.ccedillo@gmail.com. That's CARLOS dot CCEDILLO@gmail.com. YouTube channel at BenFighter2443. That's BenFighter 2443. Have a wonderful afternoon.